All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Kyle Anzalone Show. We are here live today breaking down a lot of different things going on in the world when it comes to Gaza and what Trump has planned there. And then also we got to deal with the war in Ukraine. So a lot of really important news to get into. I want to jump right into it. But first, remind everyone that if you are listening live, help us out, like the show, repost the show if you're watching on X. If you're over on YouTube, like, subscribe, share it out. All that stuff's really helpful. We're a growing channel. And so right now, you all are making the difference in getting our name out there. Other than that, I'm just promoting on my Twitter. So any of that you could do does really help us out. And of course, if throughout the show you have any comments and you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and post in the live chat and let us know what you think. All right, guys. So the first up today, we have this video that Trump posted to his True Social account, and I'm not even 100% sure what to make of this video up until now. And I really think the only way you can know what I'm talking about is if you watch it. So let's go ahead and play the video and then we'll break it down after.
Donald's coming to set you free, bringing the light for all to see. No more tunnels, no more fear. Trump Gaza is finally here. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza, number one. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza, number one.
So I guess first off, the thing I want to say is I think it would be a mistake to take this video too seriously. I think for Donald Trump, he probably thought that this was hilarious and that for people trying to pick apart the details and they see what looks like a very slim Elon Musk in a video that's obviously AI generated, and of course the bearded belly dancers and Trump and Netanyahu sitting shirtless poolside, sipping some drinks, are all just very interesting scenes. And again, I think this was AI generated, was something that Trump came across. I think more than anything, he probably thought it was funny and posted it. Now, I do think we should take it serious in that what it represents to Donald Trump is that his vision for Gaza is that he is going to be the savior. It is going to be rebuilt, and it's going to be this paradise where people could go and hang out without any fear, or, and when I mean anyone, we're talking about even like Netanyahu, our an American president, would be able to go. I do think he's really thinking that this is the vision for Gaza's future, is this Riviera of the Middle East, as we've heard. And again, this isn't just something that Trump cooked up a couple months ago. We have to remember Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, was talking about this about a year ago, several months ago. And of course, we know from the first Trump administration that, Jared Kushner is the one that had the deal of the century and was negotiating the Abraham Accords and was very involved in crafting Trump's Middle East policy and the parts of the Middle East policy that Trump thought were really successful. And so I think Kushner backing this plan should make us very concerned about what's going on here. So this video was shocking. I think, again, to take it too seriously would be a mistake, but at the same time, we should realize that I think this has a lot of representation, what Trump thinks for the future of Gaza. Now, I want to move on and play this next clip of Benjamin Netanyahu talking about his vision for Syria.
IDF forces will remain on the summit of Mount Hermon. You should really visit that place. It's a glorious sight. Cold, but a glorious sight. And in the adjacent buffer zone, we will remain for the foreseeable future. We will not allow the presence of the HTS organization or a new Syrian army in the area south of Damascus. Southern Syria will be demilitarized. As for Iran, we crushed a large part of Iran's terror axis through a series of powerful blows which aroused the astonishment and admiration of the entire world. If you're holding beepers, don't worry about it. Don't worry, it's okay.
So this whole statement is absolutely crazy. Now, for a number of reasons, it's very much going to be the reality of the situation. So Netanyahu made this statement, and then the president of Syria, or the man who's made himself president of Syria, a former member of Al Qaeda in Iraq, the founder and the leader of the Al Nusra Front, the Al Qaeda affiliate group in Syria, who only found his way to power through American and Turkish backing, and also with Israel's help in softening up Bashar al-Assad and preparing for his takeover, said, "Oh no, Netanyahu, that we can't have the Israeli forces occupying southern Syria indefinitely." And then we saw a massive Israeli bombing campaign of Syria yesterday. And so I do think what Netanyahu is talking about here is Israel extending its border into Syria and seizing some Syrian territory, probably Mount Hermon, and then areas of the Golan, and also creating a new buffer zone south of Damascus where there's not going to be any allowance for Syrian army soldiers. Now, would that one day allow Israel to take more territory? That's certainly possible. I'm not sure how much Syrian territory Israel wants to take. Whenever they take territory, issues come along with that. If they just annex it, of course, then all the Syrians who live there would suddenly be Israelis and would at least have the pretense of rights in the country. And if Israel's a democracy, that would include the right to vote, which of course would cause some problems for Tel Aviv. The one thing they want to maintain is a Jewish majority. And so if they take territory, that means they also have to remove a significant portion of the native population. And we are seeing them doing that in some villages in southern Syria. But to do that all the way through to Damascus would be removing a lot of Syrians. And that may be too ambitious of an undertaking right now, as Israel is effectively doing the same thing in Gaza and the West Bank, where they want the land, they don't want the people who live there. And so they're working on driving out all the Palestinians. And so, again, we're seeing this in some areas of Syria that was formerly the UN buffer zone region that I do think Israel is planning on annexing. But they want a large swath of southern and south, western Syria to become was a new buffer zone where there's going to be no Syrian military present. Now, this could mean that in the future, Israel is going to look to take this territory, right? Guaranteeing that there's no Syrian military there makes that very easy to do. And also, I think the Israeli airstrikes last night, massive airstrikes in southern Syria, were a real message from Benjamin Netanyahu to Jolani and Damascus that don't mess around with this, that we are very serious. Part of the reason I don't think Israel may not want to take territory all the way to Damascus is they seem to be far more concerned with southern Lebanon. And so I think it made sense for Israel to continue to annex and take territory more along the Syrian-Lebanese border, where they're also occupying and again carrying out these ethnic cleansing campaigns in southern Lebanon. Certainly they may be annexing more of that country as well and taking more territory there. So Israel is really expanding their borders right now. And Israel has been able to do this, of course, all with the backing of the United States. And that includes particularly the Biden administration. And so now there's an interesting issue being raised. This is by Dawn. It was an organization that was founded by Saudi dissident Jamal Khashoggi. Of course, he was killed by the Saudis in a consulate in Istanbul, Turkey. But now his organization is trying to stand up for the Palestinians. So let's see what they have to say.
Hi, my name is Sarah Lee Whitson from Dawn. I want to tell you a little bit about a very important action that Dawn has just taken. We have submitted an Article 15 communication to the International Criminal Court urging the prosecutor to investigate and prosecute 3 American officials for aiding and abetting war crimes in Palestine. Specifically, we are urging the court to investigate and prosecute former President Biden, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin.
So first off, I want to say we've gotten quite a few more live listeners. So if you're new in, please go ahead and give us a like and a repost. If you're over on the YouTube channel, like and share it out. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Comment, let us know what you think of the show. And going back to that clip, I want to say I don't think that Biden or Blinken or Austin are actually going to end up in The Hague, end up in the ICC prison. But I do think this is a powerful way to stain the legacy of these men who did a horrific thing during the last year of the Biden administration by giving Netanyahu an absolute blank check to ethnically cleanse the Gaza Strip. And I just want to go over some of the horrors that we saw during the Biden administration on today's show. First up, I got this article from Reuters, and the headline is Special Report, Emails Show Early U.S. Concerns Over Gaza Offensive, Risk of Israeli War Crimes. And what Reuters reported is, as Israel pounded northern Gaza with airstrikes last October and ordered the evacuation of more than 1 million Palestinians from the area, a senior Pentagon official delivered a blunt warning to the White House. The mass evacuation would be a humanitarian disaster and could violate international law, leading to war crime charges against Israel. This was a conclusion from Dana Stroll, the then Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, and she wrote that in an email to the Biden administration. So this clearly establishes that senior members of the White House were aware of the situation, that there were war crimes going on, and rather than stopping it, the Biden administration was sending Israel weapons every single day. Day after day after day, more bombs, and not just more bombs, but with all the U.S. support, UN cover at the UN Security Council, the U.S. preventing the International Court of Justice taking any action against Israel. We defend Israel in every single way, in every single domain, to allow them to conduct this genocide. And let's just talk about one of the many horrific things that Israel did during this genocide. Next up is this article. It's from 972 Magazine, which is a Tel Aviv-based outlet. So for anybody who wants to claim, oh, Hamas propaganda, this is just anti-Semitic propaganda. No, this is an Israeli outlet that wrote this. And what the title of the article is Lavender, the AI machine directing Israeli bombing spree in Gaza. And it goes over multiple AI programs that Israel was using. For all Americans who are scared of the Chinese social credit score, this was that on steroids, where basically Israel assigned every single Palestinian in Gaza a Hamas score, and if this score was too high according to the AI program, they were put on a list. And the only thing the Israeli soldiers checked before they were put on the kill list was were they a man and were they an adult. And so if you got on that kill list, then you could be entered into this next program called Where's Daddy. And so the article says, moreover, the Israeli army systematically attacked the targeted individuals while they were in their homes, usually at night while their whole families were present, rather than during the course of their military activity. According to the sources, this was because what they regarded as intelligence standpoint, it was easier to locate individuals in their private houses. Additionally, automated systems, including one called Where's Daddy, also revealed here for the first time, were used specifically to track the targeted individuals to carry out bombings when they had entered the family residence. The results, as sources testified, is that thousands of Palestinians, most of them women and children or people who are not involved in the fighting, were wiped out by Israeli airstrikes, especially during the first weeks of the war, because of the AI program's decisions. I mean, how horrifying and sickening is this, that all these U.S. bombs were dropped on the basis of what the AI program told the Israeli soldiers to do. And again, the name of this program, Where's Daddy? Why did they call it that? Because, you know, the idea is that when kids are waiting for daddy to come home from work, they're saying to mom, where's daddy? They're excited for daddy to come home. Except when daddy came home, you know, it was also an Israeli 500-pound bomb that was dropped on the house. And entire families. This is why in the early days of the war, we got these reports that literally entire families had been wiped out, over 100 of them. That in cases, people said that 100 family members, you know, these are grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, parents, children, lost 100 relatives in just, a few Israeli airstrikes. These were absolutely sickening war crimes. And of course, the U.S. knew this was going on. So everybody involved, I mean, particularly Netanyahu, all deserve to be punished for this. And while, again, I think it's unlikely any of them actually end up in jail for these crimes, certainly being, prosecuted in the court of public opinion and remembered as being people who either conducted or enabled a genocide is extremely important. So the last article I have here is just one that kind of reviews the totality of this. And this is something I recently wrote for antiwar.com. It's a Lancet study where life expectancy in Gaza was halved during the first year of the Israeli onslaught. And actually, it's much worse than they even conclude here, which was that the initial life expectancy was 75.5 and had dropped down to 39.5. But this is only for the casualties of the actual war. This is for the people on the list produced by the Gaza Health Ministry. So people who were killed from the Israeli bombardment. And of course, killing all these children is what explains the life expectancy dropping so low in Gaza. But at the same time, many of the children who have died in Gaza have not died because a bomb dropped on their house. It's because the Israelis killed their parents and they were orphaned and they were unable to get the food and the medical care that they were needed. They were unable to find shelter, or their family had no shelter. And as a baby, they froze to death, or they had no food and they starved to death, or children who died and succumbed to dehydration because they had multiple infections or a respiratory infection. All these deaths of deprivation are not counted towards this total. And so the actual life expectancy in Gaza has probably dropped even beyond the 50% mark that the Lancet study concluded. And so again, of course, anybody who is responsible for this should absolutely be thought of as guilty of genocide. Next up, let's move over to the Ukraine subject. Donald Trump has been making some pretty interesting statements here. So let's go ahead and play our first clip of Trump talking on Ukraine today.
With Ukraine and this mineral deal, what does Ukraine get in return, Mr. President?
$350 billion and lots of equipment, military equipment, and the right to fight on, and originally the right to fight. Look, Ukraine, I will say, they're very brave and they're good soldiers, but without the United States and its money and its military equipment, this war would have been over in a very short period of time.
All right, everybody, we're doing really well on the live listeners. We've doubled since the last time I had. So if you guys could just hit the repost button. If you're listening on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed. And so Trump right there is saying, and he's talking about this mineral deal. And we've been talking about it on the show since I've been doing this show. I said this mineral deal is the real risk of Trump getting embroiled in the war in Ukraine. If he ends up seeing a very lucrative deal for the United States where we're going to get a bunch of resources from Ukraine cheaply, and then we repay them with weapons, that he's going to see this as a win-win-win. Because during his first administration, he definitely liked making deals and he definitely liked selling weapons. He embraced the Saudis to such a large degree because they committed to buying weapons from the United States. Now, I think Trump is under this misguided idea that what happens is when countries buy weapons from the United States, the average American gets a good job, and this benefits American communities. That's really not the case. This money ends up being funneled into the military-industrial complex. A lot of the factory workers who make these weapons, they're not particularly good paying jobs. They're not, single income breadwinner type jobs here in the United States. They're decent factory jobs, but they're not these great, amazing jobs. And so the idea that we need to do this for the benefit of the people of the United States is just insane. And it really, what this is doing is funneling money into the military-industrial complex, into the worst, political leaders that we have here in the United States of America. And many of them are the people who hate Donald Trump the most. And so that they are not that Trump is, enriching these people is really to his own detriment. Now, I want to move on to this next Trump clip where he really, starts to brag about how much he's done for Ukraine over the years.
In fact, I was the one that gave the javelins. You remember the famous javelins? That was me. That wasn't Obama. It wasn't Biden. It wasn't anybody else. It was me. And they wiped out a lot of tanks with those javelins. And the expression was that Obama gave sheets and I gave the javelins. That was a big deal at the time. It wiped out. That was the beginning when people said, wow, that's something. Well, that was American equipment. Without American equipment, this war would have been over very quickly. And American money, too. I mean, a lot of money.
So this is a very important piece of history that everybody in the United States just forgets for political convenience. The Republicans, the MAGA movement, the people who support Donald Trump like to downplay it because they see it as kind of a problem for their narrative. They see Donald Trump as a peacemaker. They understand that the war in Ukraine was provoked by what Joe Biden did. However, what Joe Biden did in Ukraine is accelerate the Trump administration policy. Donald Trump provided these Javelin missiles and some other armaments to Ukraine. This is something that Barack Obama was unwilling to do because he understood that this was going to provoke Russia. And ultimately, Obama understood what Trump is now articulating, which is Ukraine cannot win this war. Donald Trump doesn't say it as eloquently, but basically Russia maintains escalation dominance in Ukraine. No matter how far Ukraine goes, Russia could always go further. And this means that Ukraine simply cannot win this war. But Trump made a mistake during his first administration. He started sending these lethal weapons to Ukraine, and this cranked up the pressure. This took us in the wrong direction. This is something that prevent Trump from getting along better and making better deals with the Russians during his first administration, putting us in a position where Joe Biden was able to blunder his way into the war in Ukraine in just under 2 years. And so, Donald Trump really does bear some of the responsibility. And while he's bragging here, this is really an admission that he made a huge mistake. Now, I also think it's troubling that Trump is now bragging about this because suddenly it seems that he's very concerned about making, it known that he's a big supporter of Ukraine. And maybe he wants to do that because he's shifting away from this idea that we're going to end the war in Ukraine very quickly. So now I have one more clip here this was Trump from yesterday. And let's go and play this one.
So that war fighting equipment and the ammunition, that's sustained going forward for Ukraine, and how long is it sustained?
Well, it could go forward for a while, and maybe until we have a deal with Russia. Look, we need to have a deal with Russia, otherwise it's going to continue. But now when Americans put up their money, the taxpayer money, and the president approves it, we're getting our money back in some form. But it could go on for a while, or it could be settled quickly. I think it's going to be settled quickly. I spoke with President Putin. I think he wants to settle it and wants to get on with life.
So with these remarks, again, it's getting very concerning that what Trump is talking about here is making this mineral deal with Ukraine. And if he makes this mineral deal with the current Ukrainian leadership and gives them the weapons to fight on, I think it's going to be very, very difficult for Donald Trump to then get Zelensky to sign on to any kind of peace agreement and to abide by whatever kind of agreement. If Zelensky has the weapons and he, continues to lower the conscription age in Ukraine to keep younger and younger Ukrainians fighting, to keep feeding the meat grinder on the Ukrainian side, I think he's going to do that. If Trump sees dollar signs, then he could go along with it. Now, this isn't just something that's, I'm recognizing. In fact, Boris Johnson, who I usually look at as an absolute clown and an oaf, made similar remarks recently. So let's go ahead and play this first clip from Boris Johnson.
When I look at for instance, the reality of what the Americans are proposing, I am not that disheartened. Everybody knows there's a minerals deal on the table today, right? And I think it has every prospect of being signed. And frankly, I think it should be signed because it commits the United States in black and white to a free, sovereign and secure Ukraine, and it commits the United States to future financing for Ukraine. That is not to be sneezed at.
So, what Boris Johnson is explaining this reality that I have been warning about for several months, that Donald Trump is going to see. He's going to see this money coming in, and then he's going to say, oh, we have to defend these assets. And then he's going to say, oh, now we have to put American troops, are basically warn Russia that, these minerals are American resources and they're not allowed to attack the assets going to and from those mines and things like that, and really putting the US and Russia on a new path towards direct confrontation. Now, I want to play one more clip from that Boris Johnson interview, just because in this, and it's very short, but he just makes a very important admission that often gets forgotten in the West. So
we've got to be honest with ourselves. We haven't done enough. When did you really hear European countries advocate NATO membership for Ukraine over the last 2 years? When did you hear a powerful, passionate campaign for that?
So the reason that this is really important is because now everybody in Europe is panicking. They're saying, oh no, Donald Trump has reversed course. We told Ukraine that they could become a member of our alliance, and we have an open door policy for Ukraine to one day join NATO. Any sovereign country should be allowed to join any alliance that they want. And but his statement here is that actually NATO hasn't been advocating for Ukraine to join over the past couple of years. And while Ukraine has been begging and pleading to join, the rest of Europe and the Americans have been telling them no. And this is NATO's dirty little secret, right? Where they want to use Ukraine to weaken Russia. But if they admitted Ukraine into the alliance, then they would have to fight a war on behalf of Ukraine in Russia. And if they took NATO membership off the table for Ukraine, then it would take away Russia's primary reason for wanting to invade and fight a war against Ukraine. And of course, NATO wants Russia fighting that war. And so they have to basically lead the Ukrainians on, right? That's why throughout this war, we've gone from saying we're only going to give you Stinger and Javelin anti-tank and anti-aircraft missiles to giving the Ukrainians, tanks and armored personnel carriers and F-16, long-range missiles, JDAM kits, all kinds of advanced equipment. And they've done this throughout the war. They've slowly ratcheted up their support. And admittedly, they have done it in a way not to go too far, not to allow the Ukrainians to inflict a real blow on the Russians, because that would provoke a direct war between Russia and NATO, which we cannot have. But at the same time, if we're not giving the Ukrainians more weapons, then Zelensky's going to cut a deal, because there's no way that the Ukrainians could win. And so essentially, we're treating the Ukrainians like they're a drug addict. We got them hooked on it, and now we just had to give them more and more potent weapons without ever giving them enough that they go too far and end up killing themselves when the Russians escalate far beyond where the Americans are comfortable with them doing. So I have one more clip here to break down on today's show. Donald Trump made another statement today regarding the mineral deal, where he's basically, confirmed everything I was planning on talking about on today's show, that we're going to be embroiled in the conflict. But before we play this clip, I want to remind everyone to go ahead, share, like the show, but also head on over to the YouTube channel and subscribe before we wrap up here today. That way you're notified and you're aware whenever we put out a new show, typically Mondays and Wednesdays, but you don't want to miss an episode whenever we get them out. So let's go ahead and play this last clip.
Biden has spent $350 billion without any chance of getting it back. Now we're going to be getting all of that money back plus a lot more. And we provided a great thing. I mean, we provided something very important. And we'll be working with Ukraine, and because we'll be taking that, we're going to be taking what we're entitled to take. Now, they spent $350 billion, and Europe spent $100 billion. Now, does anybody really think that's fair? But then we find out a little while ago, not so long ago, a few months ago, I found out that the money they spent, they get back. But the money we spent, we don't get back. I said, well, we're going to get it back, and we'll be able to make a deal. And again, President Zelensky's coming to sign the deal. And it's a great thing. It's a great deal for Ukraine, too, because they get us over there, and we're going to be working over there. We'll be on the land, and you know, in that way, there's sort of automatic security because nobody's going to be messing around with our people when we're there, and so we'll be there in that way. But Europe will be watching it very closely. I know that UK has said and France has said that they volunteered to put so-called peacekeepers on the site, and I think that's a good thing.
So, as far as statements Trump has made regarding the war in Ukraine over the past 2 or 3 weeks, this is by far the most discouraging and the most concerning. You know, previously he's saying some very rational things when it comes to the war in Ukraine, suggesting that the U.S. is going to adopt a policy that is acceptable to Russia and that we could make a deal that ends this war. Now, you know, the feuding with Zelensky I thought was unhelpful, and actually I was concerned that the reason that Trump was taking this position of sounding so favorable to the Russian side and criticizing Zelensky is this is the, you know, Trumpian art of the deal kind of tactics where he's really trying to weaken the Ukrainian position, make the Ukrainians feel entirely desperate and dependent and forced to take the deal that he wants. However, I'm just not sure that Trump understands how much taking this deal is going to embroil the Americans in this conflict, how much money he's going to see on the table. And I really think he's going to start putting, if he takes this deal, then he's going to start putting himself in a position where getting a deal with Russia to end the war becomes more and more difficult and increasingly less likely. If we're sending weapons to the Ukrainians are going to feel less desperate. They're not going to feel pressure to negotiate or to agree with whatever deal the Americans come up with the Russians. If the Ukrainians get some weapons and maybe made some progress on the battlefield, then we're definitely not going to see the Ukrainians moving in the right direction. You're going to see absolute panic in the United States of America if then Trump tries to end the war while the Ukrainians are on any kind of success or offensive, or at least if, you know, they stem some of the flow of losing. Additionally, once we have assets, financial assets, mines, minerals in Ukraine, what if Russia starts moving towards taking that territory? What is Trump going to do then? How much support is he going to give the Ukrainians? Is he going to try to draw red lines for the Russians and say, if you touch this territory, then I'm going to escalate in these different ways? And of course, that takes us closer and closer to direct war with Russia. The most concerning part of all of it is he's been very positive on sending European troops to Ukraine, and Russia has made it clear that this is a non-starter. So if this is a part of the peace that Trump sees for ending this conflict, we are in deep trouble. All right, everybody, that is going to do it for the show today. Thank you all so much for listening to the Kyle Anzalone Show. We had a lot of people listening live. Again, for all of you who have taken the time to repost it and share it out there, that's what, you know, a new show needs to grow and to get bigger. And so I really appreciate it when you do that. If you can now head on over to the YouTube channel and be sure you're subscribed before you log off today, that would be great. Thanks, everyone, and we'll be back with another show soon.